Election night is over. It dragged well into the night, so we're recording this later than we thought, but we got to talk about what happened. In advance of this week's smoke-filled room, which we'll still do later this week, I've got course political experts with me, Chris and Michael. We're going to talk about what just happened in this election and what it all means. The headlines here are pretty clear. Nationally, big night for Republicans and Donald Trump. In Illinois, not so great night for Republicans. But let's unpack it bit by bit. Let's first talk about national. Let's talk a presidential race. Chris, I mean, Michael, you said what a year ago, MAGA hat stays on. Chris, you've been touting Donald Trump for a while. Both you guys got to be pretty happy.
Absolutely. It was a great night for Republicans, great night for President Trump on the national level. It's looking like he's going to win the popular vote even by a decisive margin. Right now, he's up about 5 million votes on the popular vote, which is pretty incredible. I don't think anybody predicted that he would win the popular vote with a margin like that. And then he looking like he's going to sweep all of the swing states as well. So it's going to be a pretty decisive victory. Republican majority in the Senate, likely a Republican majority in the House. He's going to have a mandate in these first 2 years to really get some stuff done, and hopefully they make the most of it.
Yeah, on my end, it's been a very exciting night for the Donald Trump coalition. You look at some of the exit polling and some of these key demographics. Trump's winning. Trump's doing significantly better with Hispanic women. He's doing significantly better with Hispanic males. He's up to 18% with black males in certain polling, which, again, it's not the 30% that people thought it was going to be, but there's still some very significant numbers here. It doesn't look like Harris is going to perform anywhere. It doesn't look like Harris is going to outperform Joe Biden in any county very significantly, like they were expecting. It's a real stark rejection of Kamala Harris across the country. And Republicans nationwide are riding very high right now.
I mean, listen, is it a rejection of Harris? I mean, obviously, partially it is, but Biden would have lost by the same amount, if not more. Is this a rejection of Harris, or is this a rejection of something much larger? We talked about this last night, Chris, where I said I don't know if this is necessarily a giant vote yes for Donald Trump, though for some that it is, and I respect that. For many, it's a giant middle finger to what's been happening the last 4, 8, 12 years, where large portions of America are just sick and tired of being told how to live their lives, sick and tired of being talked down to, being called sexist and racist and misogynist and anti everything on the planet, and just sick of this environment. A rejection of the media and how they've been covering for Harris. I mean, editing interviews, not asking her any tough questions. I mean, it's they used to have a smidge of journalistic integrity, and that just went completely out the window. They didn't even care. I mean, it's just it seems to me to be a rejection of something much bigger than just Kamala Harris.
I would agree with that, Colin, because this has been prevalent in this country for a very long time. But ever since the rise of Donald Trump as the preeminent political figure, the main character, if you will, of the political process, the pushback from the special interests, the media, the corporations, all these sorts of things against the average American has been significant. That these groups and these special interests are telling you that you're wrong for being a conservative, you're wrong for being white, you're wrong for all of these things. And there is a rejection of that across the board in this entire country right now. And that's why people are pushed to vote for Donald Trump, even if they don't think he's perfect. This was the same narrative people were talking about in 2016. I do think it still exists to this day. Even if Donald Trump isn't perfect, people are drawn to him as a rejection of the system. Michael Moore called it the biggest FU in American history, and it still exists to this day, that the vote for Donald Trump is an FU. And the Democratic Party, if they're smart, if the adults were in charge of the Democratic Party, which they're not, they would look back at this and they would say, what are we doing wrong? Why aren't we appealing to the voters right now? And what can we do to make that better? And if they're smart, they'll do that. I worry the Democratic Party may not get the right idea from this because most of the people in charge of the Democratic Party have certain interests and they believe in certain things, like they're high on abortion rights, they're high on the social justice warrior stuff. So they're going to keep leaning into the culture war issues, the social issues, instead of looking at why are we losing the majority of the population.
Well, listen, they doubled down the last time they lost to Trump, and it's the reason why Trump still exists. My wife and I have talked about this so many times that the left created the monster that is Donald Trump. And you know what? If they don't learn the lessons, if the left and the media, obviously they're the same thing, but whatever. If the left and the media and some of the other groups don't learn their lesson here, they're going to create Trump V2. I mean, this is going to keep happening until they stop talking down to the majority of Americans and treating us like we're garbage, over politicizing everything. You can't have a movie or a video game or a TV show without being punched in the face with 36 different far left social ideologies, or being told you're wrong if you happen to be a white person or a male. I just think if we're going to be inclusive, let's be inclusive of everyone. It's not that hard of a concept. And I think a lot of Americans have just gotten really tired of it, really frustrated with it. And yeah, they put their middle finger up to the entire world last night and said, fine, we'll vote for this guy again. Butler, I mean, I want to go over to you and just talk about the campaign. Trump was not running that great of a race up until maybe 3 weeks before Election Day. I may be getting that timeline not exactly correct, but it wasn't that long ago where they just flipped a switch. I don't know what happened. I don't know what Trump did, but they flipped the switch, and the old Donald Trump came out, and you saw it in the polls, the massive turnaround that happened over the final month, 3 weeks, somewhere around there in this campaign. I listen. I called Trump. You guys both called Trump, so we were all correct in who we thought would win this race. But I was dang nervous about it with how bad of a race he was running for several months, but he turned it around at the end and really pulled it off.
Well, I think you can tell that he was really having a lot of fun with it in those final weeks. We were seeing some momentum, across the country. Some of the polling was starting to tighten up and look better. And then you had, things like him working in McDonald's, and then Joe Biden's garbage truck comment, and then he, took questions from the press from the garbage truck. That was like classic, iconic, like 2016 Trump. And I think that resonated with a lot of people. I think they had a great strategy on some of these podcasts that they did. Theo Vaughn and Andrew Schultz and Joe Rogan. And I mean, that last minute Joe Rogan endorsement, I think that actually was kind of a big deal. I mean, so they really they finished strong. They closed it out strong. And I think it's probably, I'm not a historian, so don't necessarily write this down or tweet it out, but I think that this is probably one of the greatest political comebacks in history. I mean, you've got a guy that was impeached twice. You've got all the, scandal surrounding January 6th and, what occurred that day. You've got 34, felony convictions in New York. Just one thing after another, and still 72 million people. It'll probably be more by the time everything's said and done. Voted for Trump anyway.
Yeah, and you saw this performance everywhere. I want to shift this to Illinois while still talking the presidential race. You saw improvement for Trump across the board. You saw a great night for Republicans nationwide, and we even saw that in Illinois. Harris is only winning the state by 8%. There's still late arriving VBMs to come in, so maybe that grows a little bit. She wins what, 9, 10 at the most? By context, Biden won Illinois in 2020 by 17. At the moment, it's a 9% improvement by Trump. That's the best performance by a Republican presidential candidate in 20 years. It's the best performance by any Republican in the state since, I think, Leslie Munger. It's a significant improvement by Trump in Illinois, and frankly, provided a really favorable environment for Republicans in this state. When the top of the ticket improves by 9 points, that really sets up Republicans all down the ballot, which we'll talk about next. But let's just talk about Trump in Illinois. That's a big deal.
And you're seeing there's some precinct level data out of the city of Chicago right now, and what you're seeing is that there's the multicultural coalition that Donald Trump was able to put together amongst urban voters. I think this is very significant in why he's performing a little bit better. He's performing better amongst Hispanics. In the 14th ward of the city of Chicago, Trump's at 32% right now. 32%. This is Ed Burke's ward we're talking about here, which is 80% Hispanic at least right now. You're talking about Trump winning precincts in Chicago's Chinatown, which, I know Collin has talked about before that he didn't think that was possible, and now it's happened. So this very diverse multicultural coalition amongst urban voters was seen across the country, and it showed up in Illinois too. We're seeing improvements with white working class again. The non-college educated voter. We're just seeing how high that ceiling can go for Trump. But I think and Butler can probably see the same things downstate. But that's why I think we're doing very, very well, and Trump's doing very, very well in Illinois right
Michael, go ahead. I'm
Oh
still trying
yeah,
to figure
no
out why the
doubt.
heck my camera randomly went blurry. So I'll work on that while you guys keep talking.
All right. I mean, you look at some of these demographic groups, based on the exit polling and stuff that we've seen, significant improvement for Trump in a lot of these categories. I saw, people between the ages of 18 and 29. Trump got 42% of the vote. Kamala Harris got 55. So that bodes well for us, moving forward. We just have to continue to capitalize on these improvements and convince these people that, yeah, you voted for Trump. Now you need to vote Republican down ballot as well, because obviously there's been drop off in certain races and in certain states. But no, great. I mean, massive improvement for Trump. I mean, going 2020 losing by 17 points. Now you got down 8 with still votes to count yet, but that's a 9-point swing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we got Butler's audio and video not syncing. We got my video going blurry for some random reason. So we're gonna do a quick cut here and then continue, hopefully with better quality. While technical difficulties resolved, let's keep going along. Let's talk about these races in Illinois. We'll talk about them in two groups. There were a number of races that Republicans have been looking at to try to hold seats that Republicans currently held that we wanted to hold on to. There were really 4 key ones that everyone was watching, though there were 7 that were kind of on the list. I'll do a quick rundown, then we'll talk about which ones really stood out to us. House District 114, Kevin Schmidt was one of the top potential pickup opportunities for Democrats. Kevin Schmidt held strong. He's up at the moment by 1,845 votes, which is a little bit over 4%. What we don't know is what's going to happen with late arriving vote by mails and the provisionals. Those are going to be counted in the coming days. So all these numbers we give you today, they're going to change, and they will most likely change in favor of the Democrats. Democrats tend to do incredibly well with vote by mail, especially in a state like Illinois. So these numbers that we're going to give you, we're all going to tighten up, but it looks like Schmidt should be okay. Brandon Schweizer in 104, he's up 771 votes. That's nearly 2%. That one might get pretty close, but Republicans feel pretty confident about it. We'll see. House District 47, Amy Grant, she's up exactly 500 votes. That's less than 1% in her district. Again, Republicans are surprisingly confident. 500 votes. If this was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, VBMs would make up those 500 votes. So I'm not ready to call it just yet, but still, nobody expected Amy Grant to do as well. Well, not nobody. We'll talk about that. But a great performance by her so far. Maybe she's going to hold on to that seat. Marty McLaughlin, 52. Left for Dead by many. He's up by 924 votes, which is nearly 2%. Again, we got to see what happens with VBMs, but 924 votes, it's a great position to be in. Now we got to watch and see and hope that that holds on. The other 3 districts that people were talking about, 79 with Jackie Haas, she's up over 11. Santa Litro in 48, she's up 16. Nicola Hahn, 82, she's up 20. So nobody ever needed to worry about those 3. We did just fine in those 3 races. Gentlemen, which ones stand out to you in the races I talked about? What do you want to cover here?
I mean, I think we got to start with 114 because that's my state rep district. So, as of right now, like you said, up 1,845 votes, about 4%. That's a strong position for Kevin to be in. We're waiting, on some provisional and vote by mail ballots, over the course of the next 2 weeks. But it's sounding like, from what I've heard from the county clerk, I was just there this morning. He's saying it's looking like Kevin should be in good shape. They're not expecting a significant amount to come in over the course of the next 2 weeks. Definitely not enough to put Latoya over the top. On that early and vote by mail, Latoya was beating us about 60-40 in that. So, I mean, she would have to have a pretty big number of votes come in for her to overtake that 1,800 vote advantage. I think what really happened here at the end of the day, 2 things. There's 69 precincts that are counted by the St. Clair County courthouse, and then there's 13 precincts that are counted by the East St. Louis Election Authority. And the St. Clair County portion that's counted at the courthouse, Kevin beat Latoya in those precincts by almost 8,000 votes. And then he was able to get around 383 votes from East St. Louis, which is almost 6%, which in East St. Louis, that's kind of unheard of. He was the highest performing Republican candidate on the ballot in East St. Louis. And when you add all those numbers together, you get that,
Well, Michael,
1,845 vote
just to
advantage.
clarify there, I don't know that the couple hundred votes out of East St. Louis or the 6% made the difference. What made the difference is a significant low turnout out of East St.
Yeah.
Louis. That meant, our projections showed that if 2020 held, if Latoya Greenwood did as well as the average Democrat from 2020 out of East St. Louis, then Kevin Schmidt might have been up by a couple hundred votes once those votes came in. The fact that those votes came in and Schmidt was still up by almost 2,000, that tells you just how low turnout was coming out of East St. Louis. And it's been a trend line, but it's been exacerbated tremendously over the last 4 years out of East St. Louis. That's the big deal
Yeah.
there.
Well, there's about 14,000 registered voters in East St. Louis, currently, and about 6,500 voted either early by mail election day. So it's less than 50%. We'll see what trickles in. They may get up to 51, 52%, something like that. But definitely not the numbers that they needed. And I think the weather played a big factor in that. We had a significant amount of rain in those, 24 hours and, before election day, and even through lunch. There's a lot of flooding and issues like that in East St. Louis, and I think that kept a lot of those folks home.
I mean, I think many of them may have stayed home anyways, but you're right. It
Yeah,
certainly probably didn't help them. All
yeah,
right, Michael, we'll come back to you if there's another race you want to talk about. Chris, what
sure.
race do you want to talk about?
Well, I of course want to talk about House District 52 because it seems like the plan trusters, like myself, we might actually pull this race off. Marty McLaughlin's got just under 1,000 vote lead right now. Like Collin said, this was 2 years ago, 4 years ago. I'd be saying, I don't know. Are we going to survive VBMs? Right now, I'm a pretty, you know what? I've been confident this whole time, so I'm going to keep being confident. Marty McLaughlin's winning this race. And it's hilarious that Marty McLaughlin's winning this race because Marty McLaughlin had no help. Marty McLaughlin really didn't do much. I mean, he had some people doing some things for him. He was knocking on doors, but he was just kind of going with the flow. And the people were, and they spent over $1 million, Kyle. It had to be over $1 million just hitting Marty on the abortion issue. And Marty didn't care. He's like, yeah, whatever, who cares? And the people of Barrington and the northwest suburbs kept him in there despite the abortion messaging, despite the money. I think that's fantastic, and I think it's absolutely hilarious.
I mean, it is hilarious. So you talk about outside groups; they were big here. I mean, they were big for McLaughlin, they were big for Grant, they were big for Schmidt. AFP came in and did a lot for all three candidates. You had TMA was very helpful for McLaughlin. They were helpful for Grant. You had, let's be honest, you had the Freedom Caucus come up and do a lot for McLaughlin and for Grant. They didn't certainly abandon those two. 150 did a lot for McLaughlin and was very helpful
And
for him.
Schmidt.
Yeah, and for Schmidt. So you had some key outside groups that can certainly take a lot of credit for wins that I think a lot of people didn't think were going to happen. Again, we don't know for sure yet, but it's looking pretty solid. Chris, to your point about vote by mail, something that really struck a lot of us last night were the vote by mail numbers. Either they're late arriving, like maybe everyone just dropped them in the mail yesterday, or vote by mail is going to be way lower than people expected in this state. Early voting was high this year, which isn't surprising considering Republicans really pushed early voting. And Republican voters are not willing to vote by mail. They'll vote early in person, but they won't do it by mail. So the VBMs that are coming in, they are breaking overwhelmingly Democratic. That's not different from previous years. What is different is that so far, fewer VBMs have come in. That's a big deal. Now, we're going to find out in the next few days, had they not just come in yet, or are they not coming in at all? And so if I'm Schweizer, if I'm McLaughlin, if I'm Grant, that's the question I want answered over the next couple of days, because the VBMs that do come in are going to break overwhelmingly Democratic. At the moment, all signs point to VBM voting by mail actually being down this year, which, to your point, Chris, I'm going to say that means I feel semi-confident about McLaughlin holding on, Schweizer maybe holding on, Grant maybe even holding on. But we're going to know in the next couple of days, certainly. Any
And
other
we'll see
races you
about
guys want to talk about, Michael?
I mean, that Schweitzer one, that's going to be a nail biter, I think. A lot of these races, we're going to have people at the courthouse, poll watching, making sure that things are being, these ballots and stuff are being processed correctly and that, everything is kosher. because I mean, 1,000 votes, 500 votes, 600 votes. I mean, those are very tight margins.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean all three of these races, Schweizer, Grant, McLaughlin, all of them are within 924 votes at the moment. They're all within 2%. At minimum, we're going to be watching these races for the next week. It could be a couple of weeks, especially till certification, but we'll see. All right,
Yeah.
any other thoughts on the whole districts, Chris? Do you have anything else you want to talk about there?
District 47. This was my lock of the century during my prediction, which we'll do later, of course. We'll go over all those. But so I'm the betting man in me is really biting my nails right now, and I'm hoping like, yeah, it's got to be 500 more votes for Jackie Williamson in here somewhere, guys, right? And this is DuPage County, as it's been called a. Some commentators have called it a giant chasm. Some, not sure who. So it's certainly possible that Grant does not pull through a vote by mail, but you're 100% right, Collin. You know, you're not seeing the vote by mail numbers that you saw in previous cycles for Democrats. And I think that's going to be helpful, very helpful to Republicans going through this process.
Yeah, and we talked about Jackie Haas won pretty solid. So all those people who kept telling me all year that I was wrong about Haas being fine, turns out I was right. Nicola Ha won by 20. And she's a rising star in the Republican Party, so it's awesome to see. Of course, we're going to talk about were some resources maybe misallocated to that race, considering we won it by 20. But we'll talk about that later. And Jennifer Santilitro, her district is not. I mean, winning by 16, that's not her district. The underlying numbers in her district are not that Republican. That's a huge overperformance, which we predicted. We've said Santilitro is another one of those rising stars in the Republican Party, and she proved it as well last night. So kudos to her and a big win in that race as well. All right, let's talk about the districts Republicans wanted to pick up. Certainly, the picture right now is decent on the hold side. Some of these races are closer and may still flip, but it's looking okay on the hold side for Republicans. But here's where reality kind of sets in. No pickups for Republicans. The top district that Republicans targeted and House Republicans spent a ton of time and a ton of money and most of their focus. House District 97 for Gabby Shanahan. She's down 1,800 votes, about 4%. Listen, Gabby herself is a rock star. She's also, I think, a rising star in the party. But we'll talk about was that a good use of resources, considering we lost that race. 45 with Dennis Reboletti. We're down by 7 at this point in that race. It's certainly way out of reach. That's a surprise. People expected Reboletti to do better in that race. Jake Keevan in House District 112. Down by 8 at this point. A lot of people thought that would be much closer, including, I think, all of us.
Yeah.
Race, pretty much everybody kind of forgot about. House District 76. Liz Bishop is only down 505 votes, which is about 1%. With VBMs coming in, they're gonna break down. So this race is not gonna go for us. However, that is the highest performance by any Republican challenger in Illinois. So kudos to Liz Bishop. I'm sure we'll talk about that race. Tossiu for DK in 51, down by 10. Desi Anderson down 7 in 91. Lori Parman, who got no help from the HRO and Republicans, only down 6 in 66. Let's talk about the Senate Republicans. House District 40, Philip Nagel down 12. That's a big loss there. Joe McGraw down 7 in aisle 17. That race definitely should have been a lot closer. And then some of our county races. Mary Cole in Lake County only lost by 8, but she did lose by 8. A lot of people were hoping and claiming she would do better. Bob Grogan for auditor lost in DuPage County by roughly 1%. Judge Kenton Scarron in the third appellate down 2%. Not going to pull that one off. Meanwhile, John Costello is up nearly 1. We said Costello wasn't going to win. We were certainly wrong on that one. He very well may pull it off. We'll see. Will County, Annette Parker, good news there, is up over 1%. I'm sure Chris will want to talk about that. So there's a couple things at the local level that don't look too bad. But overall, in a year where Trump did incredibly well in Illinois and nationwide, where Republicans had big wins nationwide, we got no wins in Illinois to talk about. Which of those races do you guys want to talk about? Chris, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I want to talk about, first I'll talk about House District 97, just because I was the canary in the coal mine on this race a year and a half. Well, not, I guess like the canary's been shot in the head at this point, but I was a canary in the coal mine in this race a year and a half ago. It says, hey guys, like maybe we can win this one. There's some things going on. I think the numbers look pretty decent. We got a good candidate here. We could maybe pull it off. And the House Republicans must have been the only thing they listened to me the entire cycle, because they really took me seriously and they really put a lot of money in this race. And it's sad because they did work really hard on it and they did put a lot of money into it. But unfortunately, the returns look like it's going to do worse in 2024 than it did in 2022 when Michelle Smith was basically not really given much help and they kind of backed out on her at the last minute. So it seems like Gabby Shannon's going to do a little worse than we did in 2022 in that district, which is sad. I think Gabby's great. I hope she runs again for office. I do think she's the rising star, but there was a lot of money put in that district, and it's like, wow, it's really tough. Also, if I can go next, or do you want to move on?
We'll go around, make sure it's fair. I listen. I want to make something clear, abundantly clear about that race and Gabby Shanahan. I've taken some flack for questioning how much Republicans have been all in on that district when we don't have the resources. It forced us to not be in some other races. But I want to be clear: in '97, Gabby Shanahan is a great recruit. She worked her butt off. The team around her, I know, worked very, very hard, and they did run a solid race in that district. So, as we sort of talk about should we have been all in that race, it's not to diminish Shanahan or anybody who was involved in the race. I think they did a great job and they deserve kudos for working their butts off and despite all the money spent against them, only losing by 4. I'm looking at my picks. I literally have it as her losing by 4. So I got that one 100% correct. A few of my other races I was off by 1 or 2, but that one I hit the nail on the head. We were never going to win that race. Now, did we make Democrats spend a little money? Yeah, we did. But we're going to talk about in our next segment how this pulled away resources that could have been spent in other races. And that was always our message. It was never an attack on Gabby. It was never an attack on her team. It was, if you spend here, when we have limited time, limited money, if you spend it here, you're not spending it elsewhere. And that was the question we kept raising all throughout the last, frankly, 6 months. And we'll talk about it more later. But again, I want to be clear. Kudos to Gabby and her team. They did run a solid race. Gabby is a very good candidate who has a bright future. Certainly proud of her for putting her life on the line here and working her butt off. Michael, what race do you want to talk about? Though I think I have an idea.
Well, 112, I mean, I expected that to go a lot better than it actually did. We kept the margins close in St. Clair County. We only lost the St. Clair County part of that district by about 1,000 votes. But the Madison County portion, I mean, Katie kind of ran away with it there, and that's really where she was able to run up the score. And I think that, some of that messaging that the Democrats used in that district, especially on abortion, resonated with some of those female voters in that Edwardsville, Glen Carbon area. The interesting thing is we had 5 county board races in Madison County that were within the 112th legislative district. All 5 of those Republicans won their races. So you have people that were splitting ticket, voting Republican at the local level, but then voting Democrat at the state level. And that was obviously a problem for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an underperformance in that race for sure. I mean, Kevin not having a year plus to run, only being slated at the end, that always tends to hurt candidates, not being able to have the full election cycle to run. So I'm sure that didn't help here. But that doesn't account for all the underperformance here. So certainly some research is going to need to be done into that district. Is Katie Stewart that well liked? Did we make some tactical errors? I don't know. We're gonna have to dig into it and find out. But certainly that was a disappointment on election night because Republicans all across the board, I think we all agreed Stewart was vulnerable. I'll be honest, I did have us losing that race, but I only had us losing it by 3, not by 8. So I was certainly was off on that. I thought it would be a lot closer. So we're gonna have to see what happened there. Chris, I know you had more you wanted to talk about. What else you got, buddy?
Yes, the Will County clerk's race, and this is a story about Will County in general. Last night is that Trump overperformed in Will County by 7.5 points compared to 2020, and he is dragging the Will County Republican Party to relevancy right now with that overperformance. Now, that's not to demean the Will County Republican Party here, but it is to say that that's part of the reason why they're doing so well right
Chris,
now.
Let's for those who don't know Will County and what's happening there, let's just make sure people understand what you mean by that. As you said, it's not demeaning them, but they didn't do much. I mean, the highest fundraiser in Will County in a large suburban county had what, like 40 grand that they spent on their race. I mean, there was
if that.
Yeah, and most of the races had 5, 10, 15,000 they spent on a county-wide race in one of the biggest counties in the state of Illinois. And so your point is that they didn't do much. They didn't have much of an apparatus. They didn't spend much. And so it was Trump's overperformance that was a significant reason why Will County did so well. And in a working class county like that, we've been saying for 2 years now, pay attention to Will County, everybody. Pay attention to Will County. While Trump may hurt us in Lake, he may hurt us in DuPage, he helps us in some of these regions. And Will County is one of those. And you just saw it last night. So I just wanted to jump in on that because I think you're making a good point and I wanted to help you make it even better.
Thank you, Collins. I appreciate you as always. But no, listen, the Republicans had their top recruit for this pick this seat, Annette Parker, and Annette is well liked in her area. She's overperforming the rest. She's overperforming Trump right now. She's overperforming the rest of the Republican ticket. She's doing very well. She's up by about 1 point. I think it's like 1.8% right now. Going into postmark VBM, it's Will County, so that means the Republicans have to show up with 60 people to postmark vote by mail for some reason. And the Democrats will be there too, and they're going to be pulling what's left the hair that's left in their heads over there. After last night, of course. But no, Annette Parker's looking good right now. I'm very happy for this result. I am. My big thing is that you look at Annette's margin, you look at Trump's margin, you look at the rest of the Republican ticket, and I think to myself, man, if we just would have done something, we could have ran the table. We could have won everything, man. But no, it's God isn't fair like that. God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers, and that's Chris's Will County political aspirations. So.
I mean, listen, the theme of the night for me was unrealized opportunities. I mean, there was potential across the board thanks to Trump's overperformance, and we just did not take advantage of those opportunities. In working class areas like Will County, we absolutely should have been playing more. I mean, where Republicans and conservatives can make a difference. You know, you drop $100,000 in a race where they're already spending millions, it isn't going to make much of an impact. But in Will County, where Republicans have just a few grand to scratch together, especially with those Zynga kind of focused elsewhere. Republicans just had no resources in Will County. If we had put some resources into the county, we could be talking about, you know, a suburban county that has flipped Republicans significantly. To me, that's just an unrealized opportunity. Michael, what else do you got?
I agree with that. I think that unrealized opportunity, there are some all across the state that, you know, with a little more elbow grease, a little more money, resources allocated, you know, in a better way, we probably would have had a better night. I mean, you see some of the margins on some of these house races and how tight they were on even on the pickups. I mean, there were opportunities out there. So it's definitely a time for reflection and planning for 2026. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it briefly. Let's talk about 76. I mean, we've been talking for a while about how some of these regions, like 76, 66, are not as anti-Trump as some of the others. We won't have the data for a couple months at the district level, but when we do, we'll talk about it. I would not be shocked to see Trump do very, very well in 76 and 66, places where we said you get out of the suburban bubble, you get out of Lake County, DuPage County, some of the suburban Cook County regions where abortion does actually play, where Trump just kills us. You get out of those areas and you see opportunity. Will County, again, 76, Liz Bishop only losing by about one, depending on how VBMs come in. The Republicans left that race a few weeks before Election Day. It was Liz Bishop putting a $75,000 loan into her campaign. It was kudos to her, Sue Rezin coming in with a big chunk of change, and they went up and put out a TV ad in the final moment. I mean, that wasn't Republicans coming in for this race. That was them just saying, we know this is close. We're going to go all in. They actually had grassroots infrastructure working hard on that race all the way throughout. There's a formula here for victory, even in the era of Trump, which we're now in for another 2 to 4 years. There's a formula for victory. There are regions where we can win, but we got to be smart about how we allocate those resources and where we focus. House District 66, this one, check the tape. I've been talking about this since filing, since candidates were out there. Republicans didn't recruit a solid candidate in that race. No disrespect to Lori Parman, but she's no tier one candidate. We didn't put anything in the race. There's no spending by Republicans. They did allocate a consultant to oversee the race and help out. So it's not like, you know, they did nothing, but they put no money into the race and no resources spent there. There's barely any A1 showing up, if any, for Parman. And we only lost it by 6. She was our third best performing challenger with no Republican investment. Where were we on that race, both with the recruiting a decent candidate and then when the race was happening, investing in the race? That was the third best performance by a Republican, and we didn't even show up for the race in a challenging race. It's just, we'll talk about, again, next, what does this mean and where are the challenges? But as we look forward, some of these races, again, it's unrealized opportunities, it's frustration, and how we could be talking about a great night for Republicans. And with how well Trump did, we should be talking about a great night for Republicans. We've talked a lot about House Republicans. We do got to talk about Senate Republicans. They spent a lot of money in Senate District 40, only to see Phil Nagel lose by a pretty significant margin here. I know the narrative here is that the caucus just wasn't going to let them not spend money. But as we've said several times in these episodes, I don't care. The reality is, you knew you were never going to win this race. Everyone knew you were never going to win this race. That's a lot of money to blow when next cycle you've got 4 or 5 big races to hold, let alone some pickup opportunities if you really want to try playing. Senate Republicans are going to need every penny that they have, and this is a lot that went down the drain. I mean, I think it was what, 500,000 roughly. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it wasn't just a couple bucks. A lot of money spent on 40. Chris, I know you were looking at that race too.
Yeah, it was about a 500,000 by my recollection. And I made a very, very bold prediction a long time ago, so don't look this back up because I'm wrong. But I said there was no way in hell Nagel does as bad as he did in 2022. And basically, they got the same margin in 2024 as they did in 2022 after spending 500,000 in a district where Trump isn't killing us. So these numbers, I mean, listen, there are races I can give you a reason why things happen. I'm a political expert. That's what they call me on this show. So I usually can do that. To be completely honest with you, I have no idea why Nagel's doing this poorly. I assume spending $500,000 would have gotten you this much money, but
Well,
I
I
guess
mean, the
not.
narrative coming out is that he got buried in broadcast TV. But let me just make it clear here. I and several others, shared our picks with each other. We talked about it. There was a consensus. I mean, we had Nagel losing by 8 in that race. So, I mean, losing by 12 is only 4 points worse than what we expected. You're saying that the only reason this race, again, there's a lot of spin going on right now, that the only reason Senate District 40 went against us was massive amounts of broadcast TV ads. That is not the only reason. That may have made him underperform 4 or 5 or 6 more points than he would have. But that is not the only reason this district went south on us.
Yeah, I think Senate District 40, Patrick Joyce, you got to wait for the guy to be gone at this point. I still respect the Senate Republicans for trying because they needed to do something this cycle, I think.
Yeah,
But
that makes one of us. I mean, listen, I love them. I've got some friends over there. I'm proving that I'm being objective here because I don't want to speak negatively about some frankly good friends, but they never should have come and played in this race. They're just it's a waste of $500,000. I'm sure the caucus wouldn't have been happy, but guess what? That's your job. You got to tell them the truth even when it's inconvenient. And this race was never in play. Never once was it in play. We before we close this down and talk about the next segment section here, aisle 17, Joe McGraw. I mean, we got to talk about that race. Losing by 7, it may get a little worse with VBMs. We'll have to see. That's an underperformance. I mean, that it should have been much closer than that. At least, I mean, what the pollsters came out and said it was 5, 5.5. I mean, heck, I'd have felt a lot better if that was at least accurate. Let alone 3 or 4 points. This is definitely an underperformance. I got some reasons why I think it's an underperformance. I mean, he talked about crime the whole race. We said stay on message, and the message we said crime was not popping. It was not the narrative that was going to work, especially not in a district that wasn't overwhelmingly black. I mean, crime worked incredibly well in black communities with black voters, but that's not a district that has a massive amount of black voters. It's got some, to be fair, but to pick your number one issue as crime when that's just not what was resonating with voters, I think that's a major reason for the underperformance here.
well,
Well, and I think another factor was their decision to go with that Judge Joe McGraw line. I think that confused a lot of people. It was them leaning into that crime messaging, like with their branding. And I mean, we all know that the issues that are important change from week to week, from month to month within a cycle. And whenever you go all in from day one on crime being your number one issue, well, that wasn't the number one issue for voters. They were talking about the economy and cost of living and things of that nature. So I think they kind of handcuffed themselves, I guess pun intended, to crime, and that just didn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there was the makings of a good brand here. Tough. I'll fight for you, just like I did as a judge. I did what was right. There was the makings of a good brand there. But you're right. It did. I like that handcuff. It did handcuff them a bit to talking about crime in a district that wasn't the issue. And using it's one thing to use these social issues to paint your opponent as an extremist, which they did sometimes, but then they just kept talking about it, like Trump a little bit too much until 3 weeks out, where it was just constantly about transgenders. And it's like, okay, what else you got to talk about? Trump figured that out a few weeks before Election Day. I don't know that McGraw and the campaign did. They were still on the transgender stuff, the social issue stuff, and that again also wasn't resonating. Again, I gave them kudos for using it to frame their opponent as an extremist. So I'm not saying to not have used it, but to make it really all you focused on crime, transgender. I mean, that's every time we heard about the race, it was those things we kept hearing about. And it took them down a path where that's just not what voters went to the polls to vote on. All right, everybody good? We talk about all the pickup races we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about what this all means. I'm going to start us off here, mostly because here we go. I'll get myself in trouble, but I just got to be honest here. All leading up to election day, I held my tongue on a lot of things. I'm a team player. I'm a proud Republican. Yes, I tweaked us sometimes when we could have done things better, but it was always to be helpful, to try to help move us forward, help us be better. There were a lot of things we were doing wrong, and I said I'd talk more about it after election day, and I'm going to talk about it in the coming weeks because we got to be honest here. There's a ton of spin coming out of election day that is completely BS. I mean, we're recording this. It's lunchtime now, the next day, and there's already my inbox is already full of spin, saying McCombie only said we're gonna hold and maybe win seats. That is absolute BS. All year, McCombie's been saying in the House, we're going to pick up 5 seats with 2 sleepers. There's quote after quote after quote about that. A few weeks ago, she changed it to 4 pickups with 2 sleepers. Never has it been, oh, maybe, we're going to hold and then maybe we'll win. I don't know where that spin came from, but it is absolute BS. Expectations were set at picking up 4 to 5 seats, if not more. And at the moment, we're at net 0. But some of these races, we might be at net -1, net -2, net -3, depending on VBMs. But at best, we're going to be at break even. That is not a good performance when expectations were set much higher than that. You had McCombie come out with her statement that election night was a victory for House Republicans, and that is absolutely not true. We also had people even on this podcast say that Republicans often do better in Illinois during presidential years. Again, setting expectations high that with Trump at the top of the ticket, Republicans should do better. And guess what? Trump did incredibly well at the top of the ticket in Illinois. And yet we're still not talking about wins. We have a state where Trump did better, 9% better. And we're talking about a victory because we didn't lose seats. Let me say that again. The top of our ticket, the reason why we're always losing in Illinois, did 9% better this time. And we're saying it's a win because we didn't lose seats. We have this perpetual loser mentality in the state of Illinois, apparently embraced by McCombie and the House Republicans, that, wow, look at us, how great are we? We didn't lose seats, which still we don't know for sure. We're going to find that out in the next couple of weeks. They might have lost seats. But at best, we're talking about a break even. And let's dive into those numbers because that break even, HRO does not get to take credit for that. They completely abandoned Marty McLaughlin. They did nothing to help Marty win. They don't get to take credit if Marty actually holds on. They dumped Amy Grant. They absolutely left her out on an island, said this race is done. Everyone said she is done. If Amy Grant holds on, it's outside groups and her that get the credit, not HRO. Yes, they were there to the end with Schweizer. They were there to the end with Schmidt. I'm not saying they get no credit for election night, but you don't get to say, oh, look, we did so great we held, when 2 of their biggest races, they abandoned and said, not our problem, or in Grant's case, she's toast. And then they actually held on to it. This spin that somehow House Republicans had a great election night is absolutely not accurate. There are factors. We should have done so much better. I already talked about it. Trump did better than ever before. The top of our ticket was not a drag in Illinois. Pritzker spent less than ever before. His focus was not on Illinois. The money that he put into the state was significantly less than what he has spent before because he's changed his focus. Another factor in our favor. Another thing, Democrats were so overconfident, they were sending volunteers outside of state. Operation Swing State, in the final weekend, the GOTV weekend, the most important weekend, had 2,300 Illinois Democratic volunteers out in Wisconsin and Michigan, 2,300 of them. In all, they had 8,000 volunteers during this election that they sent to the swing states to knock on 215,000 doors. All of that in previous years would have happened in this state, not in others. Again, another opportunity for Republicans where you had less grassroots activity in the Democrats than you've ever had before. And here's a big one. Democrats made a massive mistake on their messaging. They talked almost exclusively about abortion, and exit polling showed that the number one issue for voters was the economy at 35%. Number two was immigration at 21. Abortion was just the number one issue for just 11% of voters. Heck, Trump did 4% better with women this time than he did last time around. Abortion was not the issue. You had Democrats all in on the wrong issues that weren't resonating with voters. So, for those four reasons, we should not be talking about how we held on and that's a great night. We had a much better environment at the top of the ticket. We had Democrats had less money from Pritzker than they've had in the past. They were sending huge chunks of their volunteers out of state, and they focused on the wrong message the entirety of their campaigns. And yet, we didn't win any seats, and we might, though hopefully we don't, we might lose some seats. That is abysmal, and I am sick and tired of this embracing this loser mentality in the state of Illinois. We absolutely should have won, and let's start actually talking about getting out there and winning some damn seats. So the question comes in, why? Why didn't we win? I got three reasons that I want to point to as to why we didn't win. The first one we've been talking about for weeks, for months. We've nipped at the edges of it because we didn't want to attack our own party, but I'm going to go straight at it this time. It was an absolute misallocation of resources. They spent big money in House District 82, Nicole LaHa. Let me make sure I'm clear. Nicole LaHa is a rising star in this party who's probably going to be one of the top one or two choices for light gov for any Republican candidate for governor. Give her 2 or 4 years, she'll probably be the front runner for Republicans for governor. She is a rising star. This is not an attack on her. But that district was never in play. We said it over and over, and Republicans spent a massive amount of money in that race. Nicole LaHa won by 20. You didn't have to spend that money. She was still going to win by 8, 10, 12, even if you didn't come in with all of that money. They spent a ton of money on Desi Anderson in 91, another district that we said was never in play. House Republicans figured it out a couple weeks before Election Day and left the race, but all that money they spent up to that point was completely wasted. And then we already talked about it going all in on Shanahan in 97, which I applaud creative thinking, and Gabby is a great candidate. But that money being spent in those three races meant it wasn't spent elsewhere. Would that money have made the difference for Schmidt or Schweizer, making it not this razor close at the very end? Would that money be actually being spent for Grant or McLaughlin had made a difference? And let's look at the pickups we left on the board. Would that money have made the difference for House District 76, a race we're going to lose by 1% at this point, maybe a hair over? And we abandoned that race in the final weeks, final month. Would that money have made a difference where we could actually be talking about a pickup? HRO did nothing for Parman in 66, and yet that ended up being our third best challenger. That money could have been spent there. It's an absolute misallocation of resources, and when we have very little money to spend in the first place, you can't be spending it badly. You're going to hear from a lot of people, oh, we were outspent, and that's true. When you're outspent, you have to actually spend your money smart. I can't remember the last time that me or my company ran a race where we spent more than our opposition. We are always outspent running campaigns in a state like Illinois or now nationwide in challenging suburban districts. You're always going to get outspent. You have to spend smarter, and Republicans didn't do that. Number two, bad messaging. I am sick and tired. It's like they're trolling me at this point. McCombie's statement this morning. Here it is. I won't read the whole thing, but the issue portion. House Republicans remain committed to delivering economic growth, ending corruption, and putting Illinois families first. I mean, are they just trolling us at this point? They refuse to talk cost of living. It is the issue. Everyone agrees, top to bottom, that the economic issue right now is cost of living. Last cycle, it was the economy more broadly. The cycle before that, I think it was jobs. I don't remember exactly. The angle on the economic issue changes depending on what the situation is on the ground and what people are feeling. And right now, the economic message is cost of living. And the morning after Election Day, they still can't say the phrase cost of living. I mean, they're trolling us at this point, but it's a major reason why we aren't doing better than what you saw happen last night in election day. The last thing is just infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure in place. You see Illinois Republican Party crowing about their bank the vote program, and it was awesome. They did a great job. It did have an impact, and we can build on that in future cycles. That's a statewide initiative. That's not a local infrastructure investment. We don't have the volunteers. We don't have the precinct committeemen and precinct captains. We don't have the infrastructure, the organizations to pull a lot of these Republicans to victory. When we do have those things, when we do have volunteers, you see, like in 76, it makes a big difference. It was a grassroots effort that mostly put 76 on the map in the first place. When we have volunteer activity, grassroots activity, it makes a key impact, a key difference. What we did have this cycle were hardworking Republican candidates, some of the hardest working candidates I've ever seen in the 18 years I've been doing politics in Illinois. So kudos to them. But most of the time, they were knocking on doors with staff or family members or a couple of volunteers. We do not have the infrastructure. Going back to petitions, when we had to beg people to get off their butts and go get 5 petition signatures for a candidate, we don't have the grassroots infrastructure in the state. And what's there is fractured. There is no willingness to work together. There's no unity amongst those conservative groups, the grassroots groups. It's a problem for the Republican Party right now because we need that infrastructure. We need grassroots activity. And so when you ask, why didn't we do better? There are big reasons. We misallocated the limited resources that we had. We failed on messaging, and our grassroots activity was nowhere near what it could be and what it needs to be for us to win. Those are 3 key reasons. And I want us to stop having this loser mentality of, oh, we did fine. We didn't lose any seats. We're in the super minority. Of course, you didn't lose any seats. There's very few seats left that you could lose. And in a year where Trump did really, really well, in a year where we had everything going for us, Democrats were cocky. They had the wrong message. They weren't even focused on some of these races. They were copy pasting their marketing. They weren't even doing effective marketing in most of their races. We had every reason to have done better. And here we are, the loser party, the loser Republican Party. Oh, isn't it wonderful? We may not have lost seats. I'm sick of it. Let's go win and let's stop being the losers that we've been lately. I am sick and tired of it. My rant's over. You guys can disagree with me or agree with me all you want, but that's it. I got to take a breath.
Look, so as the number one pessimist on this program, and maybe the most pessimistic person in the entire state of Illinois for political and apolitical matters, I think the reason why the media sources which you are describing right now are hyping up the House Republican organization right now is because they expected the House to get blown out. They expected it to be 2 seats, 3 seats, 4 seats, 5 seats, 6 seats. They expected it to be very bad for the Republican Party. So when it gets to be broke even, it's like, wow, the House broke even. That was really good for them. I expected them to get absolutely destroyed. And when you're going from here to here, yeah, you think that way. But the problem is the way that the House hyped it up. If the House hyped it up as our goal this cycle is to maintain incumbency, play in a couple races and see what happens and use our resources for 2026, and they broke even then, everyone was like, yeah, this is what the House expected to do. This is what they accomplished. They weren't able to pick up any seats, but they didn't lose them. So, it is what it is. But because they came in with we're going to win 5, we might win 7, who knows? Like, we're going all in on these districts. Look at how great our candidates are. And you have to be optimistic. But I think there's a delusional optimism coming from McCombie and the rest of the House Republicans because they just expected that it was going to be 5-7. That's insane. Even 4-2, that's insane. Like, you can't have that level of expectation and then walk your way all the way back to breaking evens of victory. You have to start, maybe we pick up 1 or 2, and then you work your way back to breaking evens of victory. You can't start high and get that back low. That's my whole point here, is that they set expectations way too high, and I don't understand how you can spin it that this was a fantastic night for the House Republicans after that.
The spin machine's been pretty effective. I mean, you got Thinkson in Illinois, who I think will be on hopefully this week in the SFR, and we'll talk about he was glowing about McCombie. He said she was the big winner. Put a question mark there, but he was covering for her, making up stories about how she was never going to win seats and how she never said she was going to win seats. You saw Rich Miller, same deal, covering for McCombie, saying everything was great. Kudos to HRO, I guess. Their spin machine has been out and doing a really dang good job. But the reality is, again, you can simplify this to one phrase. Trump did 9 points better in Illinois and we didn't pick up any seats.
It's also not over yet, by the way. So you really can't, like, again, like, are we expecting to do better with vote by mail than in previous years? Yes. But how do you come out the day after election day when Amy Grant's only up 500 votes and you're saying we broke even? You know, Colin, this is an interesting thought that literally just popped into my mind. Because they did not spend in Grant or McLaughlin, they're not taking those into consideration. If they lose Grant McLaughlin, like, we didn't try in those, so those aren't losses. That's breaking even still. If I hope that's not the mentality, because if that's the mentality, you are some sick bastards over there, because that's not how this works.
That is the mentality for McLaughlin. I mean, they have been privately. I mean, I have so many text messages, emails. I've got screenshots. I'll never share it because my sources are always safe. Where HRO has been priming the pump for McLaughlin to lose for months now. It wasn't us. We were never there. It's not our fault. McLaughlin's going to lose. They've been priming the pump on that one for a while. So I don't know about Grant if they would say that about Grant, but if they had lost one seat and it was McLaughlin, they would have absolutely said we broke even. That one's not our fault. So now to take credit to say, oh, we broke even, we didn't lose anything, you can't have your cake and eat it too there. I mean, they have been MFing Marty McLaughlin behind the scenes for months now. All right, what else you guys want to talk about? Michael, I know you wanted to talk about messaging. What do you got?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. I mean, cost of living, I think that was obviously the most important issue, and it was aggravating seeing some of this messaging come out from, campaigns across the state where they just refused to say it. And I got a lot of mail or mail sent to me and mail that I personally got in my house, and it was just taxes, 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 taxes. I think that was a problem. I think that, you mentioned, Democrats didn't have good messaging either, right? They were focusing on abortion and MAGA extremism. And it's like, well, how effective is talking about MAGA extremism when Trump does better by 9 points, statewide, right? Apparently that was not an issue that was really resonating with voters at a statewide level. And then they kept hitting abortion, which our polling showed was pretty low on people's priority lists. And even nationally, it seemed like it was pretty low on people's priority list when it came to the most important issues. But I do think, to the Democrats' credit, that abortion messaging did play better in some districts than others. I think, like Schmidt, for example, didn't really resonate with people, right? I mean, it wasn't as effective there as I think it was in the 112th. I think it might have moved the needle a little bit in 112, but not in 114. I don't know about you guys,
Michael,
if
how
there
many
was
times have
some that
you and
kind of
I
moved
and our
it,
team
but
talked about being targeted and effective? It's the same argument that we hear from conservatives. Oh, if we just get a pure Darren Bailey type, we're going to pick up votes and it's going to win. And they're not wrong in some areas. Darren Bailey overperformed and had coattails for Republicans in a big portion of this state where Republicans did 6 points better thanks to Darren Bailey. But then in other places, he did worse. And so your average statewide comes out to didn't work out as well for us. Same thing for the Democrats here. Yes, there are pockets where abortion works. There are demographics where cost of living or threats to democracy, like seniors, where it would work. But as a statewide narrative, that copy paste approach, it was never going to work. Illinois is the best picture for this country in terms of how diverse we are. We are an extremely diverse state, and so running one narrative, one message, one strategy statewide doesn't work. It never has, and it isn't going to work in the future. And so, as to your point, yeah, abortion did help them, maybe in 45, maybe in 112. I mean, there's some of these districts where abortion probably did help them. But in the vast majority of these districts, or at least in some of the districts we're talking about in the more rural areas, it didn't. And even in the urban areas, it didn't. It was just in some of those solely suburban districts where that played for them.
I mean, we have to start doing more targeted messaging specific to the district, no more copy and paste. And then in some of these districts, you've got to have a different message in one township versus another, even in some cases. I mean, Schmidt is a perfect example of that. What the messaging that is effective in towns like Millstadt and Mascoutah is not going to be as effective in a town like O'Fallon. You can't just copy paste and take the easy way out. And I think both parties have been doing that, Republicans and Democrats, for a long time. And I think the first party that comes to the realization that they need to, adjust their messaging based on district and even townships in some cases are going to have much better election nights.
Yeah, have an overarching theme. Everything can fit beneath that theme. And then within a region or a district or a community, you can play off that theme, but use a local message that plays best in your community. This is basics. This is messaging, communications basics. And we have struggled with that in Illinois for a long time. This isn't difficult, but we got to actually do it.
So my thing here is that let's assume for a moment McLaughlin and Grant hold on here, which I think McLaughlin's going to. I think Grant's possible that she does. That is a huge. If there's no other victory for House Republicans and Republicans in general for the state, is that they were able to get anti-abortion candidates through. Well, I guess the HRO didn't do this, but the Republican Party in general got anti-abortion candidates through in contested elections where millions and millions of dollars were spent against them on the abortion issue specifically in abortion-loving suburbs like the northwest suburbs of Cook County and the gaping chasm of DuPage County. You have abortion being very, very strong issues here, and they beat back the tide. That's interesting in of itself. If we that no matter the Democrats put all of their money into the abortion messaging here, and we still won. That's a very, very interesting scenario.
Chris, here's what we need to talk about. And we've got, the next couple months on SFR to unpack a lot of this stuff. But it's when abortion is used right, it plays well. When it's used badly, it doesn't. The Democrats in the Senate used abortion to prove that Nagel is an extremist, and that's why it played so well for them. But, abortion itself wasn't the issue. This is what there's themes and marketing, and then there's issues. Republicans don't know how to separate those two. We're just all issues, and then that becomes our themes and our messages, and they're not the same thing. The issue of abortion didn't play. The theme of extremism and Republicans wanting to control your lives and put your daughters in jail and blah, blah, blah. The theme of Republicans are extremists, that's what does play well. Why I bring that up is Reboletti's race specifically. We've seen this now in DuPage County. We've seen it tried twice now with Greg Hart last cycle and Reboletti this cycle, where the Republican candidate came out right away and said, I'm pro-choice. I'm the model of the Republican Party moving forward. I am pro-choice. You don't have to be scared by me, and embracing the issue of abortion. And then using that issue throughout the election. And again, it's this misunderstanding or refusal to understand the separation between issues and themes and concepts. What we need to understand here is that it's being painted as an extremist that is killing us in DuPage, not the issue of abortion. Hart tried it, Reboletti tried it, it didn't work in either race. Our polling has showed that as a Republican, if you just come out and say, I'm pro-choice, I'm okay, you can vote for me, what you gain here, you lose even more here. It's not a solid strategy to develop a winning coalition. There's a much better message, which we've shared multiple times, that actually can can gain a lot of this without losing so much of this. Elections are a math game, but when you come out and say, I am pro-choice, Republicans, screw Republicans, blah, 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 you're going to lose a lot on this side. It's a math equation. So let's not get killed on abortion while also not completely turning off our base. It's not a overcomplicated concept. But because we don't understand the difference between issues and themes and messaging, we're going to keep struggling with this. All right, everybody good? We all said our piece. I'm sure we'll say more in future SFRs. Let's go to our picks. I have no idea how long this recording has been, but it's much longer than I wanted, but it's been good, so it's great. Going to our picks. Lane's going to pull those up on screen. First, we're going to talk about the races and our ranges that we went through, and we were pretty dang good. By my latest calculations, 13 or 14 out of the 17, we got the range correct. A few of these we missed. Some we were a little too pessimistic, some we were a little too optimistic, but even then, it was only a couple points here and there. Our ranges were pretty solid across the board, so I'll start there. Kudos to our team, our data team, our political team. We've been watching these races really dang closely, and our goal is to always keep you all informed as our viewers, and I think we did a pretty damn good job of that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really worried about one of my predictions, but I think in terms
we're
of
not on predictions yet. We're just on the ranges.
saying, in terms of our ceilings and our floors, I thought we did a very good job. We all missed the Senate District 40 race. It wasn't that bad, but when you have a poll that comes out and says it's only within 3, you kind of believe a poll that tells you it's only within 3. So That one,
Yeah.
I
On
think
that
is we.
one, I mean, remember when we were talking about it before and even during the recording, I was nudging the floor more and more. If that poll wasn't out, I probably would have nudged it even more. I think the floor would have been more like the 12 it ended up at, because I thought that floor was lower. But again, that poll, and when the poll came out, we agreed with it. So I'm not going to say it's all their fault. But certainly that skewed our understanding of that race. All right, let's go to our picks, since apparently we're putting Michael to bed, though none of us really got any sleep. Our picks, pretty good. I'm looking at the top nine, our locks. So right now, Michael, you had Schweizer, Schmidt, and Grant. At the moment, you've got all three right. I had Haas, Schweizer, and Chung. Again, at the moment, I've got all three right. Chris, you had Williamson, Sorensen, and Briel. At the moment, you've got 2 out of 3 right. If anything changes here, it might be, Amy Grant's the closest that changes, but then that means Michael's wrong, but Chris is right. So looks like of our 9 locks, we're looking at 8 out of 9 correct. I think that's pretty good, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, Schweizer's close. I'm a little nervous about it, but also just because the way the Champaign County has been with counting votes, like it isn't actually that close. If you just look at it in a vacuum and you see where Schweizer's number is right now, it's like, all right, he's probably okay. But Champaign County has been so weird with how they ran the election on election day, how they've been counting the votes. It's the one race where I wouldn't be shocked if suddenly I get an alert on my phone. Oh, we found 2,000 votes, just because that's how it's been in Champaign. So that's why I'm a little bit nervous about that one. But otherwise, I'm looking at these numbers. I think we're looking pretty dang good.
We should have put some money on it.
Well, I did.
Well, we'll see. I do have cheese on the line with
Well, actually,
Representative Calkins.
I
Oh
gotta
yeah.
say, maybe I put money on it. I gotta clarify because someone
Oh
like,
yeah.
what happened, but I may have put money on some races. I may have hit most of them almost exactly right, and I may have done really dang well financially with certain picks. Maybe.
And you may be giving Chris and Michael a raise.
No, that's
Maybe.
never gonna happen. What the hell are you talking about? Looking back at our list of picks, look at the overperformance. Michael, you had Kevin, sadly. I think we all kind of agreed with you on that one, and it didn't
Yeah.
play out. I had
Right.
Liz Bishop as my overperformer. Here we are. So, that looks pretty dang good. And Chris, you had McLaughlin, which your point on that was people said he'd lose and he didn't. So I think you got that right. So I'd say 2 out of 3 on the overperformance.
Not bad.
Land trusters. We were with you all along, Marty McLaughlin. I'm still not going to Cicero to look at your ballots, but we did it. We did it, plan trusters.
Looking again, underperformers. Me and Michael had Marty, and our point was, I think I said that I thought he would win, but that it never should have been that close. I think Michael, you made a similar point. So we did underperform, even if he holds us off. That was still an underperformance, but we'll take the win. And Chris, you get a chance to crow about this. You said Bob Grogan wouldn't win and underperformed. I mean, DuPage County was rough. Not only did Grogan not win, we lost a coroner there, Richard Jorgensen, who's very well liked in the county. We lost another county board seat. DuPage did not go well for Republicans last night, and you were right about Grogan, so feel free to crow if you'd like.
I'll pass on this time.
Really?
I will pass it this time. I have said enough about DuPage County in this very episode. I think we can give them a break for a little bit because I'm sure they'll give me something else to rant about, Collin. But for now,
The
we'll let
nicer
them
side
lie.
of Chris comes out. This is exciting.
Let them lie.
I think Chris is just really trying to get off the naughty list for Santa as we get closer to Christmas.
I really want to have lunch, Collin.
Oh, there's also that too. Surprises, our official picks. None of us did very well here. Lloyd in 13, Porter in 81, Martyr in 14. Nobody surprised. I mean, Porter didn't do awful, I think, compared to last time. But it's not like he surprised people. Lloyd and Martyr, didn't do super great. I will point out that my surprise that I didn't put on the board, but I mentioned as an honorable mention, was Lori Parman in 66. So I wish I had the guts to actually put it on the board instead of Porter. However, I did mention it as an honorable mention, so I'll take that credit. But overall, while our other categories were good, our surprises not so good. But hey, can't get them all right.
You know what? Jim Martyr ran a great race. I know it's not the overperformance I expected it to be, but you know what? You gave it your all, Jimmy.
And Michael, I mean, while AP had the 13th way off in their results, everyone thought for a while you were brilliant when it came to Joshua Lloyd. So maybe we'll just say stop the count there and say, look, Michael was right.
Yeah, there you go. Stop counting.
Yeah. All right, we have, as I said, we're recording this over lunchtime, and so poor Michael and Chris have not had lunch yet, nor have I. So we're going to close this down. Closing thoughts, gentlemen. Obviously, we've got SFRs in the coming days and weeks where we're going to unpack a lot of this. But as you look back to election night, what are your closing thoughts? Michael, go ahead.
Good night for Trump, that's for sure. And I wish we would have been able to take more advantage of that, overperformance in Illinois. But there's always next cycle. Hopefully, we can learn from this one.
Chris?
I should be in bed still, to be honest. I'm very tired. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're hearing the rants of Collin, Chris, and Michael, please take care of yourself. Please get some sleep. I know there's some brave souls who are going to clerks' offices every day and watching the ballots every day. I myself was one of those brave souls in the 2022 cycle, and I respect you. I appreciate the work you're doing. Please get some sleep, get some rest, please. It's good for your health. It's not good for you to be like this all the time, guys. Thank you.
All right. With that, I'll say thank you guys. A lot of great analysis throughout this election cycle. I wish I could say we're done, but petitions are in for some municipal races. They are being passed for other municipal races. So the wonderful state of Illinois basically murders all of us political animals who do this for a living because we don't get a break. We go right into this next election. We get our break after the April elections. So sorry, guys, you don't get a break. It's right back to it. We got some municipal races to win. We got to build a bench in this state of center-right leaders so we can start winning some elections in Illinois. So back to work. No rest for Michael. No rest for Chris. No rest for our Lane Davis, our producer, and no rest for you, our viewers. Let's make sure we hold on to these seats from election night last night and get out there. Let's go win some local races and rebuild our bench in Illinois so we can start winning. With that, we'll catch you on Smoke Filled Room later this week. Thanks for being with us throughout this election cycle.